This is a Year 8 English video on the novel Once, Chapter 10. If we have a look right at the beginning, we have once I was living in a cellar in a Nazi city with 7 other kids when I shouldn't have been. This tells us some important information. Barney's orphanage is actually a cellar beneath his house. The city that's referred to as a Nazi city is the Jewish ghetto that's been policed by the Nazis. And he's living with 7 other kids, and they were introduced last chapter, and he feels strongly that he shouldn't be there. So if we have a look a bit more about what's happening in the cellar, we see on page 85 that the cellar has stone walls and a stone floor and no windows. And also, shh, say most of the kids, we have to be quiet, says Zelda, we're hiding. So it's clear now that Barney is hiding Jewish children whose parents have been killed in a cellar beneath his house in the Jewish ghetto, either in Warsaw or Krakow. The characters in chapter 10 focus on the 8 children that are in the cellar. So let's have a look at Felix first of all. Felix is obviously our protagonist, our main character. He's recovered from the illness. We can see this on page 83. While I was sick, Barney let me pee in a bottle. Now he's got to go to the toilet. So he's recognising that he was sick, he's now better, and he's living in this cellar. However, he really wants to get out, and on page 85, we see I climb the steps at the top is a square door in the ceiling planks. The bolt is pulled back. I push the door, but it won't open. It's locked from the other side, says the older girl with the bandaged arm. Barney locks it. Barney locks it because he cares about the kids and doesn't want them to escape, knowing how dangerous it is out there. It tells us a little bit about Barney, even though Barney isn't in this chapter at all. Felix is quite despondent. He's realising the truth about what's going on bit by bit. He still thinks his parents are alive, but he's beginning to realise that the stories he's told himself to obfuscate the issues aren't holding up anymore. If we have a look on page 85, our parents are out there in a dangerous Nazi city. The Nazis are shooting people. They could be shooting our parents. A story isn't going to help. So where stories were so important with him dealing with reality, it's got to the point now where he's realising the harsh reality is creeping in and stories aren't doing anything. He also comes to realise the truth about Adolf Hitler, and this rocks Felix. Adolf Hitler, I say, surprised. Father Ludwig says Adolf Hitler is a great man. He's in charge of Poland. He's the prime minister or the king or something. Adolf Hitler, Zelda says, is the boss of the Nazis. Don't you know anything? I wonder if Father Ludwig has heard about this. All the other Jewish kids around here have been taken away by the Nazis. Adolf Hitler's orders, and they never come back. The only kids left are the ones hiding like us. So here is the harsh reality of the ghetto, probably the Warsaw ghetto, where kids were trucked out to work in concentration camps, work camps, labour camps, or exterminated in death camps. Father Ludwig, I wonder if he's heard about this. Father Ludwig isn't a particularly good guy, and it's well acknowledged now that some aspects of the Catholic Church, some parts of the Catholic Church, particularly in Poland, ended up supporting the Jew hatred of the Nazis, the anti-Semitism. And Father Ludwig appears to be one of those clerics. On page 87, we have Felix beginning to try and tell a story, and he justifies it like this. I try to think of something to tell them, something to take our minds off our worries, something to make us forget that the most important man in the whole of Poland hates us, and our parents, and our books. So there's a real realisation that's occurring with Felix about the nature of what's happening around him. Right at the end of this chapter, Zelda encourages Felix to use your imagination. I wait for my imagination to come up with something, anything. It doesn't. All he can think of is this issue of Adolf Hitler and how he hates Jewish children. So if we have a look at Zelda, we find that Zelda has more understanding about what's going on in Poland than what Felix does. Zelda gives me her look. Adolf Hitler, she said, is the boss of the Nazis, don't you know anything? So even though she's younger, and most of the children that are in the cellar are younger than Felix, she's quite aware of what's going on to a degree that Felix isn't. So Zelda starts to tell a story about a magic carrot, which leads all the children in the room to share their wishes. And what we see is Zelda wants her parents she'd wish 3 times over. We have, I'd wish for my mummy and daddy, said Zelda 3 times. We've got tidy hair, apart from parents, and we have dogs and grandmother's dogs, and last of all, the toddler says he'd like the carrot, which makes everyone laugh. So we can see the sorts of things that are happening and the childlikeness of the kids that are hiding in Barney's cellar. The very last section of chapter 10 reveals an issue of dramatic irony. We've spoken a lot about it because this book's major literary device is dramatic irony. All it wants to do now, my imagination, is plan how I'm going to get out of this place and find Mum and Dad before Adolf Hitler's Nazis kill them. So he's still believing that his parents are alive, while we as readers know that his parents are not alive. So we have a number of themes that have emerged out of this chapter. Of course, we have family and friends and their importance. We've got love of parents that's related to family. We've got confronting the harsh realities of life. And we have, on page 88, all I can think of is that Adolf Hitler hates Jewish kids. Perhaps God and Jesus and the Virgin Mary and the Pope do too. So this goes back to our last chapter, where we have a question at the beginning. Adults should protect children. And if Adolf Hitler isn't, maybe God isn't as well. Here we have a similar question. Perhaps God and Jesus, perhaps Mary and the Pope, perhaps they hate Jewish people as well. So we have an emotional turmoil of him wrestling with the evil that he's seeing and God's existence and the reality that Adolf Hitler wasn't the good person that he was told to be. So does God hate the Jews is another theme that emerges at the end of this chapter.